so many people today are, even people that have a massive amount of success, are profoundly unhappy. And what I want to do in our time together is figure out why people are so unhappy and what exactly they can do about it.
You're right, Tom. So many people these days are struggling. We're living in that time, aren't we, where there's so much wealth. We have so many things. We have so much technology, yet society is getting sicker. More and more people are struggling with their health. More and more people are struggling with their happiness. And they don't realize that those two things are actually very, very strongly linked. I've been a medical doctor, Tom, for almost 21 years now. Right? I've seen tens of thousands of patients, and it's really only in the last few years I've studied and seen that there is a very, very strong link between happiness and health. And that question, why are so many people unhappy? I think the simplest way to answer that is because people don't understand that happiness is a skill. Right? It's a skill that we can practice, we can develop, we can get better at that skill once we know what to work on. And I've got to tell you, I never learned that skill. I certainly didn't learn it at school. I didn't learn it from my parents. Society certainly did not teach me those skills. And having spent the last years writing this latest book on happiness, I feel that I've managed to simplify it right down into very practical, tangible things. I think we all do want to be happy. I think that's become a little bit unfashionable these days. People say it's not about happiness, it's about meaning, it's about purpose. And hey, I'm all for meaning and purpose, but I don't think they're necessarily the same things as happiness. I think every human being at their core wants to be happy, and I want to help teach people how they can do that.
Now, I'm one of those guys that's all about meaning and purpose. I'm literally the guy that you're referencing. I talk a lot about the way that I define happiness is something that's pretty transient. So I'm always trying to get people to focus on fulfillment.
Yeah.
And so one of the things as I was reading your book, I was like, okay, for him and I to have a fruitful conversation, we're actually going to have to define happiness, like what you mean by it. And so in the book, you make a really careful distinction between what you call core happiness and junk happiness. And I think it would be useful to give the definition and the three legs of the core happiness stool.
Yeah, it's a great point, Tom. Like if you say the word happiness to 10 different people, I think you could well end up with 10 different interpretations of what that means, right? We all have a different idea of what that is. And so in the introduction of the book, I was very, very clear with trying to specify, what do I mean when I say happiness? What do I mean when I say every human being wants to be happy? And I have, as you say, this definition called core happiness. Right? Core happiness, I want people to think of as a three-legged stool. And the reason I've created it like this is because I want people to understand that it is a skill, right? So everyone understands that if you go to the gym each day and lift weights, you're going to get stronger, right? That's not hard for anyone to grasp. That's ingrained in our brains these days. And I want people to think of happiness in the same way. Right? If you work on these three legs of the stool each day or as often as you can, you are also going to become happier. So what are those three legs? Alignment, contentment, and control. Right? So what do I mean by that? Alignment. Okay. Alignment is when the person who you are inside and the person who you are actually being out there in the world are one and the same or getting closer and closer. Basically, when your inner values and your external actions start to match up, right? That's alignment.
Why do you think that matters so much?
It matters because a lot of us don't know who we are anymore, right? A lot of us don't know what life we're wanting to live. Right? A lot of us are living unintentional lives where we're essentially asleep. Right? I'll give you an example, Tom, of what I mean by that. I feel until the last 3 or 4 years, despite relatively high levels of success, I think I was pretty unhappy and discontented in who I was. I don't think I really knew who I was. And I think one of the biggest problems in society is that we confuse success and happiness. Now, success is success, happiness is happiness. They can both overlap for sure if you're intentional about it. But for many of us, they simply don't. And I think for much of my life, I craved external validation. I only felt good about myself from the validation of others when I was achieving things. And I outline in the book where I'm sure this came from. When I was a young boy, my parents were immigrants from India to the UK in search of a better life. They came here, right? And they faced a lot of discrimination, a lot of struggle, like many people who emigrate and go to different countries. And I remember, Tom, I would come home from school, and if I had got 19 out of 20, they'd look at me and say, well, why didn't you get 20? If I got 99% in an exam, no word of a lie, it was like a stern look, why not 100? Right? Now, it's really interesting. As I was writing this book, Tom, I went round to my mum's and I said, hey, Mum, can I ask you something? Why did you and Dad say this to me when I was a kid? And they said, look, we face a lot of struggle. We face a lot of discrimination. We didn't want you to have to go through what we went through. So in our heads, right, the way for you to avoid that is to get straight A's. Go and get a great job like medicine, a secure job. Go up that sort of regular set out path of promotion, right? And achieve success. And here's the thing, I did all those things. But the problem is, Tom, every situation has multiple perspectives, right? So Mum and Dad are trying to drive me to be the best that I can, right? Great. But there's another perspective to that. Walk around to the other side of that table, and little Rongan takes on the idea when he was very young that I'm only loved, I'm only worth something, I'm only enough when I've got straight A's, when I'm top dog, when I'm top of the class. And whilst on the outside, it can look as though I, have achieved all these societal boxes of success, on the inside, there was a real discontentment. And actually, over the past years, as I've learned to go inwards, pretty much since my dad died, as I've stopped looking for the answers out there and turned inwards and started looking for the answers inside, why do I get triggered in certain ways? Why do I behave like this or feel like this when certain things happen? As I've gone and healed all of that, I'm now living more in alignment. I understand what alignment is. I understand what an intentional life is for me. And that's why, honestly, I'm 44, Tom, as we had this conversation. I've never felt this good. I've never felt this happy. I've never felt this content. And a big part of that is because I now live in alignment.
All right, so let's talk about the intention. How important was it for you to stop and actually write that down? Because you said you yourself didn't really know who you were. You suspect most people don't know who they are. So one, what does it mean to know who you are? And then two, how do you identify your values so that you can write them down?
Yeah. This wasn't a one hit, I wake up one day and go, I get it now, right? Now I write these down, now I'm aligned. No, this has been a step-by-step process of constant refinement. Why is it so important, right? I was reading some work by Hans Selye the other day. He is the godfather of stress. That you may be familiar with his work. He pretty much coined the word stress, at least in the way that many of us use it today. And he said that in the 21st century, the biggest stresses are emotional, and the greatest one of all is not being ourselves. Right? I think that's so powerful. Coming from someone like him, he was articulating that us not acting in alignment with who we really are is a huge stress on the body. Right? And given all the research he's done, I think coming from him, that's quite a profound statement. For me, how did I go about that process? I, first of all, would realize that every metric I hit, every bit of success I had, you have another bestseller, right? That's the truth. Like this maybe people can't resonate with this, but I can only speak my truth, Tom. This is my 5th book in 5 years, right? They've all been Sunday Times bestsellers. Now, here's the thing. You get the first one and it hits the list and you're excited. You think this is great. Yeah, I want to help people. I want to help 100 million people around the world live happier and healthier lives. But I can't deny that also there was a part of me that was attracted to the validation that comes with having a successful book. I would be lying if I said that wasn't the case. So it made me feel really, really good. But you realize that these successes are very short-lived. Before you know it, they've gone again. And, this happens year after year. I keep hitting these metrics of success. And I think, I know, but it doesn't really change how I feel. Like, it really doesn't. It's It's an artificial high. I guess you can almost call it a junk happiness type habit, which I can explain shortly. But I realize more and more why, with all this success, with all this external validation, why do I still move towards these junk happiness habits? Why do I still not feel enough in who I am? It didn't fill the hole that was there inside my heart. And Tom, you've had people on your show before saying the same thing. I don't know if you've heard of a chap called Jonny Wilkinson or not. Jonny Wilkinson is one of England's most famous rugby players, right? He was probably one of the most famous rugby players in the world in the early 2000s, right? In 2003, he achieved all of his dreams, right? So when he was a kid, Tom, he wrote down, when I'm older, I want to play for England and I want to win the World Cup. Now, here's the problem for him. At the age of 24, he achieved his dreams, right? 24, he's playing for England. Not only do they win the World Cup, he kicks the winning goal in the final minute of the World Cup final. He came on my show recently and he shared that actually even before that ball had gone through the goal, he's starting to go downwards inside. The next morning, he can't get out of bed, depressed, anxiety.
That's so crazy.
For years.
The chills.
He achieved his dreams. That's why in chapter 1, I make quite a provocative statement. Your dreams won't make you happy. Right? And I want to add a caveat there. Your dreams won't make you happy unless you're intentional about them. So what I think many people have learned, Tom, over the past couple of years, particularly with all the restrictions and, you know, the fact that people can't move around and do the things that they've wanted to do and always used to do, I think a lot of people have reflected on their lives, like what's truly important for them. You know, what is it that truly makes them happy and feel content? So there's a really simple exercise in the book that I think is deceptively simple. It's very, very powerful. And I don't know, Tom, if you're interested, I could try it on you right now if you're up for it.
Sure. I've seen you do this. Let's go.
Yeah. Have you got prepared answers?
I don't, actually.
Okay, good. Okay, so top of your head, don't overthink it, right?
Yep.
If I was to ask you, what are 3 things you could do this week that if you did them would truly make you happy and content? You know, can you name 3 things?
So for sure, spend time with my wife, write creatively, and what would be a third? Meditate.
Okay. And then the second part of this exercise is what I call write your own happy ending. So now, you know, fast forward, Tom Bilyeu on his deathbed, right? Looking back on your life, what are 3 things you will want to have done?
Yeah, so I may think differently about the deathbed than most people. So this will be interesting. When I'm on my deathbed, what I will be thinking about was, did I love my wife and elevate her and make her feel awesome and really get that relationship to thrive? And then I will ask, did I turn my potential into usable skill set? And then did I use that skill set in a way that actually fulfilled me and helped other people? But I really think on my deathbed that it's going to be a bit of it's just a frame of reference game. And you talk a lot about Edith Eger?
Edith
Am I getting
Eger,
that
yeah.
name right? Who survived Auschwitz, just the story is insane. And her whole thing is basically, how are you looking at the situation? So for instance, I think that on my deathbed, I will probably regret that I didn't have kids, but I don't regret it now. And so I've primed myself on how to think about it, because on my deathbed, I will want something to live beyond me, right? I can already feel that. So like, I get how at that point, especially if, I mean, look, as much as I want to believe that these YouTube videos will live forever, I know better. And so I can feel that tug now. It's one of the ways that nature ensures that you have children. So I do think on my deathbed, I might perform a slightly different act than other people. Sort of however I end up, I'm going to frame it in a way that is optimistic because I'm about to peace out. So, and I think that speaks to a lot of your book, but tell me if you think I'm crazy.
No, I love that. You're someone who, it doesn't surprise me lives a very intentional life. You know, I had the pleasure of speaking to Lisa yesterday on my show, right? We had a long conversation, and you know, she was sharing the game that you guys often play, the no BS game, what's it going to take, right? So this is a very intentional game where you guys literally, you know, instead of having wild dreams, you break it right down and you specify what is the goal, what literally will it take to get there. So it doesn't surprise me that you and Lisa are people who are very intentional about how you're choosing to live your life. And, you know, in Lisa's book, and you've mentioned before, you guys have intentionally chosen not to have kids. So it's really interesting for me to hear you saying that actually, despite that intentional decision that we made, you feel that you may regret that on your deathbeds. Now, I think for many people, what this exercise is about, it's about intentionality. It's not about beating yourself up. For example, Tom, most people will say, like you, on my deathbed, I hope I've nourished my friends and family, my meaningful relationships. Yet if they look at their week-to-week life and they realize, wait a minute, I'm working so hard. I know you work super hard. I know many people who watch these videos, Tom, work really hard. I'm working so hard that actually I don't have any time to see my wife, see my friends, see my partner, see my kids. And what this exercise does, it just allows you to reorientate your life and go, okay, wait a minute, I'm slightly off track here. If you enjoyed that short clip, I think you are really going to enjoy the full conversation, which you can check out here.